Dr. Autonomy. May I now invite our respected Principal Dr. Autonomy to deliver the inaugural address. Neha Gupta will now felicitate our respected guest. Now I request Aman Mishra to kindly felicitate Dr. Prabodh Kumar Mishra, Honorable Bursar of Kidderpore College and Organizing Secretary of today's seminar. A big round of applause for our Bursar sir. Thank you, sir. Now I request Ayush Shaw to felicitate our IQAC Coordinator and Chief Advisor Dr. Swati Pal. Now I request Mohammad Sahib to felicitate our organizing committee member and Honorable Teachers Council Secretary Dr. Apurna Pal. And now I request Rohit Shaw to felicitate the convener of today's one-day national level seminar, Dr. Chandramali Das. Now, since due to scarcity of time, we will also felicitate our dignitaries today. First of all, I will call upon Dr. Shilata Ghosh, Honorable Professor, Department of Economics, to felicitate Dr. Shivashish Chatterjee, Professor, Department of International Relations, Jabalpur University. Next, it is time for us to felicitate our Honorable Professor Dr. Anindya Jyoti Mojumdar, Professor, Department of International Relations, Jabalpur University. May I call upon Dr. Amrita Bhattacharya from the Department of Mathematics to felicitate Dr. Anindya Jyoti Mojumdar. Now it's time to felicitate our Honorable Professor Dr. Ishani Noshkar, Department of International Relations, Jabalpur University. Dr. Samiuddin, Assistant Professor, Department of Persian, will felicitate Ma'am Dr. Ishani Noshkar.
May I now invite our respected Principal Sir, Dr. Abhijit Ganguly, to deliver the inaugural address. Hello.
Respected speakers, honored guests, esteemed colleagues, distinguished chairpersons, dear students, participants and paper presenters from different colleges and universities, all teaching and non-teaching staff of my college, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure and a deep sense of responsibility to welcome you all to this ICSSR ERC sponsored national seminar hosted by Kidderpore College, Kolkata, on the profoundly significant seminar India's stance and strategy in the potential crisis of World War III from different global perspectives. At the outset, I extend my heartiest gratitude to ICSSR Eastern Regional Center for supporting this intellectually vital initiative. My sincere appreciation also goes to Dr. Chandrauli Das, the convener of this seminar, Dr. Prabodh Kumar Misro, the organizing secretary and bursar of the seminar, Dr. Shati Pal, the ITC coordinator of the college, Dr. Aparna Pal, Teachers Council Secretary, for their tireless efforts for organizing this seminar. We are deeply honored to have with us an eminent panel of speakers, Dr. Bimal Shankar Nando, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, Charu Chandra College, Kolkata, Dr. Shivashish Chatterjee, Professor, Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, Dr. Anindo Jyoti Mojumdar, Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, Brigadier Devashish Das, Indian Army, Dr. Lokhi Narayan Shatpati, Director MMTTC, University of Calcutta, Dr. Ishani Nashkar, Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, and we are equally privileged by the presence of our special guest, respected Dr. Rumpa Das, Principal Maheshwara College, Kolkata. I also express my heartiest thanks to the technical support team of my college, which includes the name of Dr. Dipendu Rai and Professor Pidu Chandra Das. By interpreting the theme, A World on Edge, the idea of a third world war, once relegated to speculative geopolitical discourse, is no longer entirely hypothetical. The global order is currently characterized by intensifying great power rivalry between two or more than two nations at a time. The prolonged impact of the strategic volatility in the Indo-Pacific region, the fragile situation in West Asia and Middle East countries are increasing horribly, and kinetic power in regards to the most powerful economic emperorship. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military expenditure reached approximately $2.4 trillion in 2025, marking a continuous upward trajectory. Nuclear arsenals remain a critical concern, with over 12,000 nuclear warheads to preserve globally, and modernization programs are underway in major nuclear states across the world. These data underscore a stark reality. The architecture of global peace is under significant strain. In this situation, India's strategic position between tradition and transformation are as follows. India's approach to global conflict has historically been rooted in the principles of non-alignment evolved into strategic autonomy. India, our greatest historic country, always used to practice on Panchashil, that is 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. India's advocacy for multilateralism and diplomacy are evolving. However, in the 21st century, India's stance reflects a nuanced recalibration strategic partnerships even without any its alliance. India is an active member of platforms like Quad while maintaining strongest bilateral relations with defense preparedness and technological modernization. India ranks among the top 5 military spenders globally, with increasing focus on indigenous defense production under the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiatives. In geopolitical balancing, India's neutral stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict demonstrates its effort to balance national interest with global diplomacy. In economic and technological diplomacy, as one of the fast-growing major economies, India is leveraging economic strength and digital autonomy as strategic tools. In global perspectives, India achieves a multipolar reality with shifting centers of power economy in the world, where the Western Bloc, including US, emphasizes collective security frameworks with NATO. China advocates alternative institutions like Belt and Road initiatives, and added to this, China's hegemonic stance towards Taiwan, which undermines global stability, a factor that cannot be dissociated from the threat of deploying hydrogen bombs and biological weapons. The US bunker buster strike on Iran, potentially involving the assassination of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini, a ground invasion and a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which would trigger a global crisis in oil and fuel supplies that would severely impact the entire world. India has thus far remained largely undisturbed. The reason lies in India's robust foreign policy coupled with the advanced infrastructure for refining crude oil, mainly imported from Russia. Today, India has no longer feared even the threat issued by US President Trump to impose a burden of 50% international tariff. For this, India is a developed country, as advanced India, a self-reliant India. The global South with India as a leading power of equitable global governance. India's leadership during G20 presidency in 2023 highlighted its commitment to inclusivity, sustainability, and peace building. It's fact that a strongly powerful country like America, China, and North Korea are well versed about the fatal and deadly consequences of nuclear war. They also know very well that nobody can escape or escalate after the first attack. Now war has generally transformed into a strategy for becoming an economic aggression, and modern warfare are generally limited till date with an intense air attack or missile attack, including bunker buster bombing, cyber attack, etc. As the psychological pressure of nuclear warfare could be floated again and again in near future, but every country knows the adverse reaction of actual nuclear war, which may devastate the other countries within a fraction of a moment. So the look askance at each other would also be counted. Or already stymied and economically spoiled country like Iran may try desperately to run on their taste for making nuclear reactors, and if a single stroke of patriotic force exists there, and if somehow they are able to build up their atomic power very quickly, They must try to apply the same on Israel and other US-based countries of the Middle East. And if they somehow succeed to do so, by any chance, the consequences of that incident would be really very much terrible and horrifying in the entire history of humanity. The Middle East conflict and Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and particularly after the Iranian missile attack over the energy infrastructure of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, have caused global oil prices to surge. According to BBC News, the crude oil or the Brent oil has been exceeding $120 per barrel in India. This is a significant increase from pre-war levels, driven by severe disruptions in supply chain and concerns over the security of oil shipments in all over the world. According to Al Jazeera and some other analysts, if the disruption persists more, the price may reach up to $150 to $200 per barrel within April-May. According to the Hindu, it's causing significant pressure on Indian government as India import 85% of its crude oil from Russia, including the other countries of Europe and Africa. Naturally, these surging costs have also affected the other energy sectors like natural gas, LPG, and CNG supplies, including the hike of cost for urea, phosphate, and other fertilizer needful for our Indian agriculture. Till date, Government of India is striving to supply the LPG cylinder to the common people with subsidized price. But if the Persian Gulf War persists, the situation might be worse than today. A significant chunk in stock market will also fall substantially in Europe, including all parts of Southern and Southeast Asia. This seminar is not merely an academic exercise. It's a platform to generate actionable insights that may contribute to national and global policy discourse. Let us a call for peace and preparedness. While discussion on World War III may seem alarming, they are necessary. This does not imply any kind of pessimism. Rather, it reflects responsibility. India's role, therefore, must be guided by tightening the border security force between India-Pakistan and India-Bangladesh border to restrict and make protest against false narratives regarding the human casualties, crash landing, ambushment, etc. Pakistan usually spreads such type of propaganda and fake narratives against India to some extent. Via reputed international journals, media, India's generosity is that India can never do this kind of activity. And it is essential to make peaceful diplomacy with neighboring countries with strategic deterrence in regards to restrict infiltration, especially in the border of India, Bangladesh, and global cooperation as well as humanitarian leadership is needful also. At the same time, the role of academia and the civil society is very important in this regard. In times of geopolitical uncertainty, academic institutions must promote the critical inquiry and policy research, encouraging the interdisciplinary dialogue and serve as a think tank for strategic foresight. As we inaugurate this seminar today, at this historic point of view from multiple dimensions, let us remember that knowledge, dialogue, and cooperation remain our strongest tool against any conflict. I am confident that the deliberations over the next session will enrich our understanding and contribute meaningful to this critical discourse. I once again welcome all the dignitaries, scholars, and participants, and wish the seminar a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring and insightful lecture. I will now request our respected guest, Dr. Rumpa Das, to share her thoughts. respected Principal Sir, distinguished academicians and scholars, respected paper readers, and my dear students. I am honored to be invited to an extremely relevant and what promises to be an extremely engaging seminar on a very relevant topic of discussion at present. Kidderpore College has a tradition of organizing such extremely insightful and intellectually stimulating discussions, and I congratulate Kidderpore College, Team Kidderpore College for this endeavor as well. Even as we stand here in this hall, located in one of India's most iconic and celebrated academic pilgrimages, the National Library of India, a temporary truce has been reached amidst a lot of bloodbath, a lot of destruction, with widespread destruction of human lives, property, economies of different countries, and what is most important to me and most of all in this juncture is a palpable and a potential danger and risk to the children of this world. As a citizen of world's oldest democracy and the land which is also the birthplace of Lord Buddha, Lord Mahavira, Sri Sri Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahansa and Swami Vivekananda, we have always prioritized and upheld peace or Panchashil, as my friend Dr. Vijit Ganguly rightly pointed out. Yet again, as a country that is emerging as a strong player in global geopolitics, India has to remain alert to the emergent situation, its different perspectives, and take specific stands for government policies and administrative strategies. As a result, our country has to sometimes endorse and advocate emphatic and aggressive martial responses over peaceful negotiations and diplomatic arbitrations. As a mother, as a teacher, as a citizen of this country, it is not easy to helplessly watch all these situations where peace is superseded by violence only in a bid to restore peace. I am reminded of my favorite poet, Shukanto Bhattacharya, and I yearn to speak out. এ বিশ্বকে এ শিশুর বাসযোগ্য করে যাব আমি, নবজাতকের কাছে এ আমার দৃঢ় অঙ্গীকার। Today's seminar promises to look into the broad spectrum of situations and possibilities by an array of distinguished experts, erudite scholars and academicians. As I already said, that Kidderpore College has been committed to organizing such kind of academic gatherings in the past, which have engendered critical discourse and initiated new thought processes. And I'm looking forward also to a valuable book publication which will possibly contain the rich harvest of today's deliberations. I wish all the best to Dr. Vijit Ganguly and Team Kidderpore College. I have already seen, being a member of the IQSC, how Vijit and his team members have steered the college to heights of academic excellence, and I wish this seminar a grand success. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your thoughtful speech. I now request our Honorable Bursar Sir, Dr. Prabhu Kumar Mishra, to share his thoughts.
Respected, no.
Hello.
Respected our Principal Sir, Dr. Vijit Ganguly, and respected Rumpa Das, Principal of Mahastava College, my dear friend, Professor Dimon Shankar Nando, and dear speakers who are present here, and my dear colleagues, students, paper presenters, our IKS coordinator, Professor Satyapal, our TC secretary, Dr. Autonomy, and my dear students. It is a great privilege on my part to be here to say something, though we are late by 1 hour today due to inclement weather prevailing. However, I am not the proper speaker on this topic. Academicians are here, experts will be here, either online mode or offline mode, they will speak on the topic. And it will be my request to Principal Sir and our coordinator from the post of Organizing Secretary, though I have been made, I request him the discussion which will be made here, prepare a note and send it to the policymakers of our nation, because in this potential crisis of World War III, what will be the stances and strategies will be taken by them, not by us. We the general people at every moment are suffering of this crisis. From this crisis. Crisis is made. You know, Hormuz Pranali is blocked. But in Kolkata, residing in a remote place of West Bengal, we are suffering from what? Fuel. Suffering from what? That's the price hike of auto. Here, there is a war due to the decision of a mad person in the world, like Trump. What he is doing to the connivance of Israel, they are making war with Iran. I think that Iran has not first made the war. They are making, and we are suffering, and we are thinking how to overcome from this potential crisis of this world war. We have to make what? What are the stances and strategies? What is the stance and strategy? It is one thing to advocate our what? Diplomacy. And there is an embassy. We have to straighten, we have to make strict our border security force. Because of that, our country, what is they doing? They are every year they are increasing their budget in what? In defense. But in education, we are the educationists. We are the educationists. We will say more and more here. But we are not making people more educated. Our budget is too much lower. But we will give them, and they will rule us. Every year, budget is being increased for defense purpose. Okay, it is required for our safety. So, it will be my humble request from to the speakers and to our principal sir, what they will say from the practical point of view, the stances, the strategies, it can be forwarded to the policymakers for our safety, for the safety of our journey. It is my request. With this, I think that our program, though we are not many, but within these, we can raise our voice. We can send our thinking to the policymakers that we the Indian people who think বসুধৈব কুটুম্বকম আমরা টোটাল পৃথিবীটাকে বন্ধুর মতো ভাবতে চাই। With this, I conclude, I end my speech and think that our program, our seminar will be a grand success today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such pragmatic and heartfelt speech. Before going to the next speakers, let me share something very good, something very heartfelt, that is, we, the college teachers, the professors, respected principal sir and our dignitaries, we are going to now officially release our annual college magazine, Srishti. Thank you, everyone. Now I request our IQSC coordinator, Ma'am Dr. Swati Pal, to say something.
Respected Principal Dr. O.P.T. Ganguly, Organizing Secretary and Bursar of Kidderpore College Dr. Prabhukumar Mishra, Convener of the seminar Dr. Chandramani Das, esteemed guest Dr. Rumpa Das, Governing Body Member Dr. Vibhendu Roy, our TCS Dr. Aparna Pal, distinguished speakers Dr. Bimal Shankar Nando, Professor Shivashish Chatterjee, Professor Anindo Jyoti Mojumdar, Professor Lokhinarayan Shastapati, Professor Ishani Noshkar, Brigadier Devashish Das, and participants, my colleagues, supporting staff of Kidderpore College and students. It is my privilege as the IQSC coordinator to extend our warm welcome to all of you to this significant seminar on India's stance and strategy in the potential crisis of World War III from different global perspectives. This theme is not only timely but also deeply relevant in an era marked by geopolitical uncertainty, shifting alliances, and emerging global challenges. We are living in a world where the nature of conflict is rapidly evolving. Traditional warfare is increasingly complemented by cyber threats, economic pressure, information warfare, and strategic competitions over resources and technology. আমরা এমন এক বিশ্বে বাস করছি যেখানে সংঘাতের প্রকৃতি দ্রুত পরিবর্তিত হচ্ছে। প্রথাগত যুদ্ধের পাশাপাশি এখন ক্রমবর্ধমান হারে সাইবার হুমকি, অর্থনৈতিক প্রেশার, তথ্যযুদ্ধ এবং সম্পদ ও প্রযুক্তির উপর কৌশলগত প্রতিযোগিতা যুক্ত হচ্ছে। এমন এক জটিল আন্তর্জাতিক প্রেক্ষাপটে ভারতের অবস্থান অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ হয়ে ওঠে। কেবলমাত্র একটি দেশ হিসাবে নয়, বরং বিশ্বের শান্তি, স্থিতিশীলতা এবং বহুপাক্ষিক সহযোগিতার পরিবেশ বজায় রাখার একটা দায়িত্বশীল ভূমিকা। পাশাপাশি নিজের স্বাধীন কণ্ঠস্বরটুকুও অটুট রাখা। India's foreign policy has historic axes. India's approach is marked by a careful balancing of national interest with global responsibility, engaging with major powers while maintaining its independent voice on global platforms. In this context of potential World War III scenario, India's strategy would likely emphasize diplomatic engagement, conflict de-escalation, and the strengthening of international institutions. একই সাথে ভারত তার জাতির ও নিরাপত্তা নিশ্চিত করার লক্ষ্যে নিজস্ব প্রতিরক্ষা সক্ষমতা বৃদ্ধি করছে, সীমান্ত সুরক্ষা জোরদার করছে এবং কৌশলগত অংশীদারিত্ব গড়ে তুলছে। This dual approach of preparedness and prudence defines India's contemporary strategic posture. As an institutional commitment to quality education, the Internal Quality Assurance Cell recognizes the importance of fostering critical thinking, informed debate, and interdisciplinary understanding among students and scholars. This seminar serves as an academic platform where diverse perspectives can converge and enable us to analyze complex global realities through scholarly articles. I sincerely hope that today's deliberation will not only deepen our understanding of India's strategic choices, but also inspire meaningful research and discussion on global peace and security. Let this seminar to be a step towards nurturing informed citizens who can contribute thoughtfully to national and international discourse. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the organizers, speakers, and participants for making this event possible. I wish the seminar a great success and enriching discussion ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swati Pal. Now, there will be a small program. A small token gift will be given to the principal of Maheshwara College, Dr. Rupa Das, from Kidderpore College by our Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Ganguly. And we are very happy that Professor Lakshminarayan Shatpathy, Dr. Lakshminarayan Shatpathy sir is with us. I request Dr. Mizanur Rahman to felicitate our professor, Dr. Lakshminarayan Shatpathy. Thank you so much, sir. Now I request our Teachers Council Secretary, Dr. Autonomy Pal, to share her thoughts.
নমস্কার সকলকে। আমার মাননীয় অধ্যক্ষ ডক্টর অভিজিৎ গঙ্গোপাধ্যায়, সেমিনারের চিফ সেক্রেটারি আমাদের বার্সার ডক্টর প্রবোধ কুমার মিশ্র, ডক্টর চন্দ্রাবলী দাস, আমাদের আইকিউসি কলেজের ডক্টর স্বাতী পাল এবং আমাদের যারা অনারি গেস্ট আছেন, ডক্টর শিবাশিস চ্যাটার্জি, ডক্টর অনিন্দ্যজ্যোতি মজুমদার, ডক্টর ঈশানী নস্কর, ডক্টর লক্ষ্মীনারায়ণ সত্পথী, ডক্টর বিমল শঙ্কর নন্দ, ডক্টর ব্রিগেডিয়ার দাস এবং ডক্টর রূপা দাস সকলকে আমার আন্তরিক প্রীতি এবং খিদিরপুর কলেজের পক্ষ থেকে সুস্বাগত। আজকের বিষয় India stands a strategy in the potential crisis of World War III from different global perspectives. এই সেমিনারটা বলতে এসে প্রথম দুটি লাইন মনে পড়ে যাচ্ছে, কবিগুরুর লেখা দুটি লাইন। পশ্চিম আজি খুলিয়াছে দ্বার, সেটা হতে আনে নানা উপহার, মিলাবে আর মিলিবে, দিবে আর নিবে, এই ভারতের মহামানবের সাগর দিবে। এখন উগ্র জাতীয়তাবাদের যে সংকট, তার যে ভয়াবহ পরিণাম যুদ্ধ, এটা আলোচনার অবকাশ নেই, কারণ রাষ্ট্রনেতারা শিল্পীদের বন্দী করে রাখে, সেখানে শিল্পীর কথা শুনবে এটা বাধ্যতা মাত্র। এখানে আমরা নেই, আমরা বরঞ্চ ভারত এই সম্ভাব্য তৃতীয় বিশ্বযুদ্ধে ভারতের অবস্থান এবং কৌশলের দিকে আমরা একটু নজর রাখবো। আমরা বিগত বেশ কয়েক বছর ধরে যদি তাকাই, দেখো ভারতের বিদেশ নীতিগুলি আমি যদি একটু আবহাওয়ার সঙ্গে তুলনা করি, একটি নাতিশীতোষ্ণ মনোভাব। সে কোনোভাবে এক পক্ষের সাথে পুরোপুরি চুক্তিবদ্ধ হয় না, একটা সকলের সঙ্গে একটা ভারসাম্যগুলো বজায় রেখে চলে। যে আমেরিকা, রাশিয়া, চীন সকলের সাথে একটা ভারসাম্যগুলো সহাবস্থান করে। কোনো জায়গায় যুদ্ধ হলে আলোচনাকারী হিসেবে, মধ্যস্থকারী হিসেবে ভারত উঠে আসে। এই যে কৌশলগুলো ভারতের দিক থেকে, এগুলি আমাদের ক্ষেত্রে খুব, শুধু আমাদের হওয়ার লক্ষ্যে যে স্টেপ নিচ্ছে সেটা আমাদের জাতিকে মজবুত করার ক্ষেত্রে প্রধান স্তম্ভ। যে যার জন্য আমরা লোকাল মেড প্রোডাক্টগুলোর উপরে আমরা জোর দিচ্ছি, যেটা আমাদের দেশকে ভেতর থেকে শক্তিশালী করে তুলবে। যুদ্ধের ক্ষেত্রে নিজের পায়ে দাঁড়ানোটা সব থেকে বড় সম্পদ। আমার এই সমস্ত বিষয় বিস্তারিত বলবেন আজকে যারা বিশেষজ্ঞ এসেছেন। আমি শুধু দু একটা অনুভূতির কথা আপনাদের কাছে শেয়ার করছি যে ভারতের ইউনিকনেস, ভারতের যে স্পেশাল কিছু বৈশিষ্ট্য আছে যেটা সারা পৃথিবীতে নেই, সেটাই ভারতকে শক্তি যোগান শুধু নয়, সারা বিশ্বে ভারতকে নেতৃত্বের পজিশনে নিয়ে যাবে। আমরা জানি ভারতের যে এই যে সংস্কৃতির যে বিশেষত্ব, এটা কিন্তু একদিনে কোনো একক প্রচেষ্টাই হয়নি। যুগের পর যুগ, বছরের পর বছর ভারত লালন পালন করে এসেছে। সেটা কি? ভারতের মূল সংস্কৃতির কিছু দিক আছে আমরা জানি। প্রধান হচ্ছে একটা, তার মধ্যে একটা অন্যতম, প্রধান বলবো না, অন্যতম অতিথি দেব ভব। ভারতের যে প্রাচীন শিক্ষাগুলো আপনারা দেখুন, যখন পাকিস্তানের থেকে বাংলাদেশ যুদ্ধ হয় তখন ভারত তার সাহায্যের হাত বাড়িয়ে দেয়। যখন তুরস্কে ভূমিকম্প হয় তখন ভারত সাহায্যের হাত বাড়িয়ে দেয়। ইয়েমেনে প্রবলেম হলে সাহায্যের হাত বাড়িয়ে দেয়। শ্রীলঙ্কায় গৃহযুদ্ধ হলে সাহায্যের হাত বাড়িয়ে দেয়। নেপালে ভূমিকম্প হলে সাহায্যের বাড়িয়ে দেয়। এই যে ভারতকে যে পাশে কোভিডে করোনার সময় আমেরিকাকে, বহু দেশকে সে ওষুধ সাপ্লাই করেছে। এই যে ভারতকে যে পাশে চাওয়া এবং পাশে পাওয়া, ভারতের বন্ধুত্বগুলো, এটা বিশ্বের কাছে একটা উন্নততম বার্তা। ভারতের দিকে যদি আমরা তাকাই, ভারতের পুত্রের প্রান্তরে, ভারতে শুধু এই আলো ঝলমল দেশে যারা আমরা বাস করছি তা না, মানে অন্ধকার কোণে কোণে প্রান্তরে তারা ভারতের কৃষ্টিকে লালন পালন করে চলে। ভারতের যে সহিষ্ণুতা, আমরা জনসংখ্যার অনেক, আমাদের সম্পদ অপ্রতুল, কিন্তু আমরা যে সবাই বেঁধে বেঁধে থাকি, সবাই যে মিলেমিশে থাকি, ভারত অন্যের সম্পদ কেড়ে নেয় না। ভারতের যে সম্পদ আছে সেই সম্পদকে বিশ্বের সাথে যুক্ত করে, বিশ্বের যে সম্পদ আছে ভারতের মধ্যে গ্রহণ করে, কিন্তু শক, হুন, পাঠান, মোগল এক হয়ে গেছে ভারতের মৃত্তিকায়। ভারতের মৃত্তিকার মধ্যে যে এরকম একটা ক্যাপাসিটি আছে সেটা তো আর কোনো দেশে নেই। সেই দরদ দিয়ে ভারত যে সকলকে আপন করে নেয়, যুদ্ধ করে না, কেড়ে নেয় না, ধ্বংস করে না, মানুষকে ডিপ্রাইভ করে না, বরঞ্চ যা আছে সেটা মিলেমিশে উন্নততর বিশ্বের দিকে ভারত এগিয়ে যেতে চায়। এটাই আমাদের কাছে বড় গর্বের। আমরা ভারত হিসেবে গর্ব অনুভব করছি। বিশ্বের দিকে হয়তো ভারত একটি নেতৃত্বের দিকে চলে যাবে। সকলকে ধন্যবাদ আমার এই ছোট্ট কথাগুলো শোনার জন্য। সবাই ভালো থাকবেন।
Thank you so much, Dr. Aparna Pal. It is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks at the conclusion of this novel session. At the very outset, I express my deepest gratitude to our respected principal, Dr. Abhijit Ganguly, for his inspiring inaugural address and for his constant encouragement and leadership, which have been instrumental in organizing this particular conference. I extend my sincere thanks to our esteemed guests, Dr. Bimal Shankar Nando, Dr. Shivashish Chatterjee, Dr. Anindajyoti Majumdar, Dr. Lakshmi Narayan Shatpati, Dr. Ishani Noshkar, and Brigadier Devashish Das for their graceful presence in this conference. I also extend my sincere thanks to our bursar and organizing secretary, Dr. Prabodh Kumar Mishra, whose guidance, coordination, and tireless efforts have been the backbone of this event. I am also deeply thankful to our respected IPC coordinator and chief advisor, Dr. Swati Pal, for her valuable support and insightful words that have enriched today's session. My heartfelt appreciation goes to Dr. Aparna Pal for her kind presence and encouraging address, and for being an integral part of the organizing process. A special note of gratitude to the convener of this seminar, Dr. Chandrapuri Das, whose vision, dedication, and relentless efforts have made this seminar a reality. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to Dipendra Roy for his overall supervision and monitoring of the program, ensuring its smooth execution, and to Professor Piru Chandra Das for providing essential technical support throughout the event. I would also like to acknowledge all members of the organizing committee, faculty members, research scholars, and student volunteers whose sincere efforts ensured smooth conduct of this inaugural session. Our sincere thanks to all the participants and attendees for being a part of this academic gathering and for contributing to its intellectual vibrancy. With this, I extend my heartfelt thanks to each one of you. Now, I will hand over the microphone to Dr. Amrita Bhattacharya to moderate the plenary session. Over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Respected principal sir, distinguished speakers, esteemed colleagues, participants, and dear students. It is my profound privilege to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this one-day national seminar on India's stance and strategy in the potential crisis of World War III from different global perspectives, organized by Kidderpore College and graciously sponsored by ICSSR-ERC. We are living in a time of profound geopolitical transformation marked by rising global tensions, shifting alliances, and complex security challenges. In such a scenario, it becomes essential to critically examine the possibilities of large-scale conflict and its far-reaching implications. India, as a key global actor with a strong commitment to strategic autonomy and balanced diplomacy, occupies a crucial position in navigating these uncertainties. This plenary session brings together distinguished speakers who will share valuable insights from diverse perspectives. I am enough confident that today's discussion will be both enriching and thought-provoking. This session will be chaired by Dr. Prabodh Kumar Mishra, Bursar and Organizing Secretary of the seminar. We are honored to have him preside over and guide this session. It is my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Bimal Shankar Nando, Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at Chandra College and the President of the West Bengal Political Science Association. He will be delivering a lecture on the topic Global Turbulence and India's Preparedness and Analysis of Modi government's policies. In today's rapidly changing global scenario marked by economic uncertainties and geopolitical challenges, understanding India's preparedness by policy responses has become highly significant. This lecture promises to provide valuable insights into these crucial issues. We are truly honored to have such a distinguished academician with us today. With great respect, I now invite Professor Nanda to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Now I request Professor Nando to speak afterwards. First I will request Professor Dr. Onindo Jyoti Mojumdar. Yeah, Professor Department of International Relations, Kidderpore University, to deliver his lecture on the topic Shifts in Global Geopolitics and the Recurrent Inevitability of Conflict. উনি আমরা রিকোয়েস্ট করছেন পরে বলবেন বলেছেন কিনোটটা আগে করবেন Thank you, Amrita, for cooperating me and the moderator of this plenary session. First, I request Dr. Shivasi Chatterjee, Professor, Department of International Relations, to give keynote address on the topic already written in the pamphlet. Everybody knows today that India's stance and strategies in the present crisis of World War III from different global perspectives. Sir, I request to start your keynote address.
Thank you very much. Let me extend my thanks to all the dignitaries present here, two principals, the principal of Kidderpore College, and also Madam, who in fact happened to be a year junior at the Department of English to me. Okay, and I'm very happy to see Shubhakinadi, happy to see Geography, who was my direct student, and Iti, who also happens to be my direct student, so it's a great feeling to be here. Now, without any further ado, let me make a few things clear right at the outset, which is that I am not going to speak anything on India. There are speakers who are going to talk about India, so I would not, repeat or, in a sense, let's say, make their life more complicated. Okay, I mean, speaking about India. So what I would therefore do is that I will broadly talk about: do we really face the scenario of the Third World War? Okay, are we in the brink of the Third World War? And very broadly, what I would do is that, I am basically a person who in fact does IR theory. So therefore, I would very broadly take you through IR theory and tell you that what exactly theories in fact say, and what theories in fact, how theories might guide in understanding what the world is and where the world in fact might be moving. So the first point, in fact, is this: that look, the liberal international order in which we live, that order in fact had been in crisis, had been in, I would say, had been facing challenges for a long period of time. So therefore, the first thing in fact is to underscore the point that the crisis in fact is not new. It is not that the liberal international order in fact is facing crisis today. It is undergoing a crisis for a long period of time. But at the same time, it is also equally important to note that orders don't give in very easily. Because if you look at the liberal international order, the foundations of that order in fact was laid many centuries, over many centuries. Okay, I mean, so it is a common misnomer to broadly make the argument that the order in fact came into being in 1945. It did not came into being in 1945. Its foundations, possibly its institutionalization, happened in 1945, but if you're looking at the roots of the roots of that order in fact goes much back in time. And very broadly, there are three principles to the order which in fact are absolutely critical, okay, and I therefore draw your attention to understand why the order in fact is still in fact, I would say, persistent, and the order in fact is not exhausted. The first of these in fact is that the order is premised on the principle of modernity, okay, and no matter how critical we could be against some of the manifestations of the modern, or the idea of the modern, it is absolutely impossible to turn our back on the modern. So what you call the artifacts of modernity in fact would hold, and it would continue to provide some kind of stability, let's say, to the order. The second, in fact, is that the order is also predicated on the idea of the territorial nation state. Now, the territorial nation state obviously has become an ubiquitous political community, and given the fact that it has become an ubiquitous political community, what is significant is this: that there has been a complete desiccation of imagination. We don't think in terms of any alternative political ideas when it comes to living in political organizations. We all, in fact, live and think in terms of states. And there is no challenge to the idea of the state, okay? Which means that there could be territorial challenges to particular states, there could be threats to the sovereignty of states, but there is no threat to the idea of the state. Okay, I mean, a territorial state is not to be confused with the idea of the state. They're two very different kinds of things. And the third thing that I would very broadly tell you, in fact, is this: that the significant underlying basis of the liberal international order, in fact, is a very dense intermeshing of a number of what I would call elements. Part of it is geopolitics, part of it is economics, part of it is, in fact, norms. And these, in fact, have created a very complicated and a very messy world where complete disaggregation, in fact, is not really, I would say, a very easy thing to achieve. And so therefore, the long and the short of it is that the liberal international order is definitely undergoing crisis, but we need to have some understanding of the distinction between a crisis in the order and a crisis of the order. A crisis in the order is a crisis that we are all witnessing, but it is not a crisis of the order. Okay? And a crisis of the order, in fact, is a much what I would call larger, let's say systemic crisis. We are still not into it. Now, the second thing is this, that there are ideas floated by different theories, which in fact take stock of what kind of world in fact we are inhabiting and how exactly we can understand the threat. So first, let me take you to political realism, which in fact remains the most dominant, I would say, theory in international politics, and realists in fact are having a field day, given the fact that there is an upshot in geopolitical rivalry the world over. I'll bring your attention to the perspectives of two realist scholars, who in their own ways provide us exactly the nature of the threat or the nature of the problem that we see or that we face. The first is the work of the celebrated realist scholar John Mearsheimer. Now, in a series of recent articles and a series of interviews, Mearsheimer in fact have very broadly provided three arguments which in fact are worth noting. His first argument in fact is that the international world order is resembling 1945, and it threatens to go back into the multipolarity of the 19th and the 20th centuries, which obviously means that we are increasingly into a high risk order. So this is his first point. The second point is that there are two flashpoints which he thinks in fact could ultimately lead to a very major conflagration, which in fact can trigger a very, very major war. There is some kind of a restraint. The first of these is the war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine. And the second in fact is the Asia-Pacific theater, particularly with regard to Taiwan. Now, we all know that there is no war over Taiwan right now, but Taiwan in fact remains a very significant what you call flashpoint, and at any point of time there could be a very major crisis happening with regard to Taiwan. And so therefore one would have to see what exactly the nature of that crisis is. Mearsheimer is also extremely critical of what he calls the framework of American foreign policy, despite the fact that he's an offensive realist. But he very broadly says that American foreign policy in fact has got it wrong. And why it has got it wrong is that it has simultaneously challenged two states which in fact are nuclear power states. And challenging two nuclear power states at two different theaters in fact would obviously be a very dangerous strategy to follow. So in the Asia-Pacific, the competition with China in fact has obviously increased. And if you look at Europe, the competition with Russia is also is also upping. So both of these, in fact, they bear ominous portents, a la Mearsheimer. That's what Mearsheimer in fact is. Now, his suggestion, in fact, is that the best way to avoid, such a conflict to degenerate into something like a World War III, in fact, is to articulate a concept which he calls spheres of security. So he broadly says that the powers in fact have great powers as spheres of security, and all that is needed in fact is that others should not meddle, or others in fact should not get into the spheres of security. The second realist whose ideas I think are also equally significant, poignant, relevant, is Stephen Ward. And I again draw from some of Stephen Ward's very recent writings. He writes a column in an influential, foreign policy journal called Foreign Policy. And in some of the, recent writings that in fact he has done in foreign policy in particular, he articulates a scenario which in fact is something which is a little different. So his first point in fact is that we are in crisis, but we are not into anything like the Third World War. And he says that the world resembles a lot like the world before 1913. But he says that there are guardrails still in place. And given the fact that there are guardrails still in place, some of the crises which we are witnessing, obviously, like for example, the weakness or the weakening of the liberal international order, these are obviously serious enough, but nonetheless, the great powers, in fact, they would possibly go for an incremental strategy rather than, rather than breaking out into an open conflagration. Ward's point, in fact, is this, that he broadly draws attention to the fact that the problem lies with the United States. So both Mearsheimer and Ward, in fact, they agree from two very different, what we call vantage points. Ward is a classical, defensive realist. A defensive realist who very broadly says that states, in fact, do not want power, they want security. Okay, I mean, so from a purely security standpoint, Ward says that America is responsible for the chaos, for the trouble, and he says that it is responsible because the Americans simultaneously have, has become predatory both towards their allies and adversaries. And that is the problem, which he calls very broadly, forever war, overstretched. Okay, I mean, this is a phrase that Ward, in fact, has coined, forever war, overstretched. It probably sort of means that the United States, in fact, almost, is unable to stay clear of war. Okay, I mean, it has to be a part of some war or the other. Okay, I mean, that overstretch, in fact, is something which has, which might lead to deep consequences, or which might lead to very serious consequences. So his final argument, in fact, is this: that he says that the nuclearization of the international order, the fact that we are dealing with nuclearized great powers, would ultimately prove to be the deterrent against a third world war. But that doesn't rule out the fact that we might be heading into a time where there would be a lot of small wars, okay, limited conflicts. So this is broadly what the realists, in fact, are saying. So if you get into the realist idea, then I think the takeaway from there are 2 points that I would bring to your notice. One is that they pay attention to history. They broadly make the argument that none of the 2 world wars, in fact, are the results of a very well thought out, grand strategy or a grand plan. Both the world wars resulted because of accidents, okay, or because of misperceptions. That possibility obviously is not ruled out at present time. So the second is this, that there is a great transformation, a great change that in fact has happened, which is nuclear weapons. So 3 things are important here. One is that all the great powers, in fact, they have sufficient capabilities. Second, their alliance portfolios, in fact, are unstable. And the third is that there is a lot of wrong signaling, which in fact is happening at this point in time. And these again would carry problems, these again might lead to conflicts, but these conflicts would not lead to something like a replication of First World War or Second World War. Yeah? This would be small incremental conflicts, which in fact would, in a sense, go on, but it would not lead to a massive explosive conflict, primarily also because of the fact that tectonic changes, in fact, have also happened to the technology of war. What do the other theorists, in fact, say? Okay, I mean, so I'll very broadly, talk about power transition theory, because the power transition theorists, in fact, they say that the world is not an anarchy, which is defined as the absence of a central regulatory authority, but the world, in fact, is hierarchical in nature. And they say that this hierarchy, in fact, is challenged when 2 things happen, but they have to happen simultaneously. The first is that the challenger's capabilities must almost sort of level up with the capability of the hegemonic power. And the second is that when the challenger, achieves parity, what the challenger will do depends on whether the challenger in fact is satisfied with the international order or not. And so therefore the fate of the international order depends on the interaction between these 2 variables. Okay, I mean, the Chinese, who in fact are obviously the challenger here, they are almost sort of near the United States when it comes to the indicators. But do the Chinese really want to change the international system? The Chinese, in fact, are absolutely in the forefront of having an open international order. Because if you look at the way in which the Chinese, in fact, have gained prominence, if you scan the way in which they have actually become more developed in 30 years, their development, in fact, have happened through an open economic system. So the most pro-globalization state at the present epoch, in fact, is China. So the Chinese, in fact, they do not want to close doors. The Chinese don't want protectionism, the Chinese want open trade. They want the BRI, in fact, to gather momentum. It is all because of the fact that the Chinese, in fact, wish to export more and more capital. And that, in fact, remains a long-term, what you call Chinese, I think, objective. So it is very difficult, therefore, for the power transition theory to give us a prediction as to how the Chinese, in fact, is going to react. Would they really challenge the American supremacy? Would they really go for a whole-scale transformation of the order? Very difficult to say. What do the liberals argue? Okay, at one level, the liberals obviously are on the back foot. The liberals are on the back foot because of the fact that most of the attributes of liberalism, they are in crisis. The rule-based order is in crisis, institutions are in crisis, the efficiency of liberalism is in crisis, and even, much of the regular frameworks of life, like for example diplomacy, like for example the rules of commerce, like for example innumerable institutions which in fact I call the municipalities of global life, all these institutions in fact are functioning. Despite war, despite conflicts around the world, these institutions in fact are still functioning, diplomacy is functioning. Norms in fact are contested, but norms are not dead. So in a sense, therefore, there is a paradoxical situation here, which brought this on draw attention to the fact that one part of liberalism is in crisis. There is the other part of liberalism which in fact is surviving, and therefore maybe in future some kind of a transformation in fact is going to happen, and liberalism in fact is going to get back some of the legitimacy which in fact it used to have in the past. Now, the next theme which in fact I find very interesting is constructivism, which in fact is a very new, comparatively a new perspective. Now the constructivists draw attention to something which to my mind is very significant. Look, wars are not explained entirely by material factors. Materiality is important to life, but materiality is not everything. Imagination also matters, identity also matters. So our sense of belonging also matters, okay? And so these are absolutely critical. Across social sciences, social scientists know that the idea that social identities or life in fact is constructed is not a new idea, okay? But international relations usually tends to lag a little bit. Ideas which in fact happen a little bit early in other social sciences take a little bit of time to arrive to international politics or international relations as a discipline. What do the IR scholars say? They say that four things are worrisome. First is xenophobic nationalism. And xenophobic nationalism, in fact, is becoming the defining trait when it comes to the projects of otherization. In other words, otherization is becoming existential. And if otherization becomes existential, then obviously the norms of the game, in fact, will change to some extent. The second point in fact is, following from the first, is that look, issues like migration are different. The connotations are different. The connotations are very different. And the third thing which to my mind is also equally significant is the fact that constructivists also make the argument that, the very historicity of truth or the very veracity of truth in fact is now questioned as never before. Narratives in fact are spun which in fact question what is called the received, I would say wisdom or received truth. Now if truth is questioned, several consequences obviously might follow, but one of the consequences that follow in fact is that the whole sense of history obviously becomes, I think, controversial. Okay, I mean the whole notion of history in fact becomes, I think, contested. And finally, there is a point that the constructivists draw our attention to, which is that look, not only do we find that history is contested, not only do we find truth is contested, but we also find that today's conflicts, in fact, which could be looked upon as cultural conflicts, they are not merely defined as cultural conflicts, but they are increasingly framed as civilizational narratives. Again, culture and civilization are not the same thing. The moment you invoke civilization, the intensity of emotion, the intensity of what I would call attachment, in fact, it reaches a completely different pitch. And as a result, I think mobilization also assumes a completely different direction. So the constructivist in fact very broadly says that yes, there is a problem here, a problem which in fact is unmistakable. But they say that look, norms are always contradictory. On the one hand, we have a norm which in fact is otherization. But on the other hand, we have norms of hospitality. We have norms against, the use of nuclear weapons, taboo, nuclear taboo. We have, taboos against the use of weapons of mass destruction. We have overall a broad, let's say, sort of convergence on norms of human rights. These, in fact, have not completely vanished. So we are into norm contestation. Okay, I mean, norm contestation, in fact, takes a very long period of time to resolve. Finally, my point is this: if you look closely, then international relations actually doesn't say where the threat is most potent. And the threat of Third World War, or threat which in fact is the most significant, is domestic, and it is not international. And there are two things which I draw your attention here. The first, in fact, is that one of the most significant domestic threat, in fact, is the crisis of democracy. And the second threat, in fact, is the crisis of very broadly what would be called liberal democracy, which is which is in some way what would call constitutionalism. I'll take constitutionalism first, and I'll then move to what is called very broadly, the threat to democracy. Now, when it comes to constitutionalism, I think the best vantage point we have, in fact, is to read Farid Zakaria's work on illiberal democracy, where Zakaria very broadly says that what we are witnessing, in fact, is that states are becoming formally democratic. But these formal democracies, other than regime change and other than what would be called, electoral modifications, these states, in fact, are not democratic in essence. These states, in fact, are not democratic in the genuine true sense of the term. And they are not primarily because of the fact that these states, in fact, are no longer committed to constitutionalism, which means that democracy is not merely about having institutions, but democracy is also about an ethos. And the crisis that we are witnessing, therefore, is a crisis of ethos. When it comes to democracy, the problem, in fact, is that most democracies have become competitive authoritarianisms, whether we like it or not, which broadly sort of means that the two elements of a democratic political system, tolerance on one hand and forbearance on the other, both of these, in fact, are in crisis. Okay, there is a book which, in fact, very recently came out by Levitsky and Zablat. It's popularly known as How Democracies Die. And in that book, I think they clearly sort of I think they clearly tell us what exactly is happening here. The problem of democracy is not the problem of illegality. The problem of democracy, or the crisis of democracy, is not the problem of states not playing by the law. States are playing by the law to kill the law. Okay, and so therefore this element of what I would call duality, where law in fact will be used in order to make legality, what would be called, weak. This is something which cuts deep into the domestic political system. So my conclusion, therefore, in front of you is this: that as I said, that it's nothing that I have spoken on India. My conclusion is as follows: that there are three mechanisms at work here. There is a power hierarchy change, which in fact obviously is going to be disturbing. There is a crisis in the liberal order whose direction is uncertain. And there is an increasing, I think, what would be called, contestation of domestic politics, where both liberalism and democracy in fact are becoming weak. And as a result of these, and these obviously, they build on each other. And as a result of this, we are indeed at a time which in fact is the worst time since 1945. There is no doubt about it. And what is going to happen will depend on either of the two things. One is that we can move towards an alternative, more durable world order, which in fact would be based on the claims of justice and also the claims of dignity. Or we can allow a catastrophic, what you call worldwide violence which in fact is like a catharsis, that phenomenon in fact I talked about a long time back, for a new system in fact to emerge. Technological changes are weaponized, trade is weaponized. Some of the most significant, what I would call, geopolitical strategies in fact have become militarized. But the point is that we would be living with these for a considerable period of time. I do not see that the world is going to break out into a third world war. But let us brace ourselves for a life of violence, at least for a decade, if not more. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Dr. Shivashish Chatterjee, for your enlightening keynote address. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next esteemed speaker, Dr. Bimal Shakunando, Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at Chalachandra College and the President of the West Bengal Political Science Association. He will be delivering a lecture on the topic Global Turbulence and India's Preparedness and Analysis of Modi government policies. We are truly honored to have such a distinguished academician with us today. With great respect, I now invite Professor Nanda to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Before that. Very simple.
Before that, I request MD Shahid to felicitate Brigadier Devashish Das.
Now I will request Professor Bimal Shakunando to deliver his lecture.
Thank you. Respected principal of this college, respected principal of Master College, all the teachers of the college, including my long-time friend Dr. Kumar Vishnu, all other dignitaries on the dais, my fellow panelists, Brigadier Das, and the students of this college. At the outset, I would like to convey my gratitude to this college for inviting me to say something, to share my ideas with all of the present in this seminar. A few months ago, when Chandrapali made me a call and informed that the college wants to organize a seminar on this topic, which involves the potential crisis of World War III. Initially, I could not encourage her. My reaction was that, apply Corona, etate permission দেবে না। But she was not convinced. বলেছিলেন যে আমাকে না আমি অ্যাপ্লাই করবো। পরে দেখো পাওয়া খুব মুশকিল, কারণ এরকম টপিকে দেয় না। But I am happy that Chandrapali successfully has organized this seminar, and particularly on this topic. But I have some questions about the potential crisis of World War III. That's why I am discussing, and I have decided to discuss on India's preparedness in terms of global turbulence. Yes, turbulence is there in international politics, but as our previous speaker, Dr. Shivashish Chatterjee said last week, it is the crisis of the system, crisis of the order, or crisis in the order. To me, it is the crisis within the order. But the present global order is not going to be destroyed totally. পুরো ভেঙে যাবে গ্লোবাল অর্ডার এই যে ঘটনা ঘটছে আই ডোন্ট ফাইন্ড এনি পসিবিলিটি পুরো পসিবিলিটি আমি অন্তত দেখতে পাচ্ছি না সো পোটেনশিয়াল ক্রাইসিস অফ ওয়ার্ল্ড ওয়ার 3 এটা আমার কাছে একটু কোথাও মনে হয়েছে যেটা বোধহয় একটা পসিবিলিটিস ভেরি ভেরি রিমোট international politics is always in a state of flux change may happen at any time কিন্তু কিছুটা তো ভবিষ্যৎবাণী করা যায় দেখা যায় কিছুটা দূরে 1991 যখন হান্টিংটন লিখছিলেন ক্লাস অফ সিভিলাইজেশনস অনেকে ওটাকে উড়িয়ে দিয়েছে কিন্তু প্রেজেন্ট ইন্টারন্যাশনাল পলিটিক্সে there is no class of civilizations আমি অন্তত বলতে পারবো class of civilization is there ঠিক যেরকম ফুকুয়ামা when he was writing the end of history in National Intelligence Journal in 1989 when socialism was in a state of crisis and Soviet Union was going to be dissolved very soon. It was clear in 1989 that Soviet Union will not last long. আমরা বুঝতে পেরেছিলাম আর সেই সময় আমরা মোটামুটি চাকরিতে ঢুকে গেছি আমরা বুঝতে পেরেছিলাম এই দেশটা টিকবে না সোশ্যালিজম ধ্বংস হতে চলেছে ওই সময় ফুকুয়ামা wrote this article, The End of History. And what was the argument of Fukuyama? I quote, history should be viewed as evolutionary process and that the end of history in this sense means that liberal democracy is the final form of government for all nations. Fukuyama accepted liberal democracy as the final form of government. But as we all know, 2.5 decades have already passed. Liberal democracy has been established in some of the nations, but most of the nations, or some of the nations, are still authoritarian, dictatorial. Different types of nation states are there. সব দেশে লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসি প্রতিষ্ঠিত হয়ে গেছে এটা বলতে পারি না ন্যাচারালি ক্রাইসিস যে নেই সেটা বলতে পারবো না এবং এর সঙ্গে আরেকটা কথা বলি ইন ফেভার অফ ফুকুয়ামাস থিসিস there is another theory democratic peace theory democratic peace theory যারা ইমানুয়েল কান্টের সঙ্গে তাদের একটা সম্পর্ক খুঁজে পান টমাস পেইন ইমানুয়েল কান্ট they argue that mature democracies rarely or never go to war with one another. যারা mature democracy তারা পরস্পরের সঙ্গে লড়াই করে but all the democracies in the world are not mature enough. Some democracies are there like Iran, but is it a democratic state? There is a question. America is definitely a mature democracy, but what is the behavior of America? Is it like, should it be called a democratic behavior? So the প্রশ্নগুলো international politics এ আছে এবং থাকবে. There may not be a war between America and Canada, but there is a war between America and Iran. So what will be there? International order ভেঙে যাবে সেটা বলছি না, কিন্তু war থাকবে. What will be there? Naturally. This is the reality. Now the question is, are we prepared enough to face this reality? এই বাস্তবতা মুখোমুখি হতে আমরা প্রস্তুত তো? What is Modi government's policy? I am focusing on Modi government's policy. যে এই ধরনের অবস্থায় কি ঘটতে পারে? Now, initially এই যে পোস্ট কোল্ড ওয়ার গ্লোবাল কনফ্লিক্টের কথা আমরা বলছিলাম সেটা ইন্টারস্টেট রাইভালরি একটু কম হয়েছিল আফটার 1991 রাদার এথনিক কনফ্লিক্ট সিভিল ওয়ার দিস থিংস হ্যাপেন টু এ লার্জ এক্সটেন্ট এগুলো বেশি করে ঘটেছিল সিভিল ওয়ার বেশি করে ঘটেছিল বাট অ্যাজ ইউ অল নো In most of these cases, the nation states got themselves involved in all these situations. সেই সিচুয়েশনগুলোতে তারা ইনভলভ হয়ে গেছে কোথাও না কোথাও। সিভিল ওয়ার হয়েছে দুটো দেশের মধ্যে, কিন্তু নেশন স্টেটগুলো ইনভলভ হয়ে পড়েছে। তাই ইন্টারন্যাশনাল পলিটিক্স নেশন স্টেটকে বাদ দিয়ে ভাবতে পারছি না। নেশন স্টেটরা খুব বেশি হয়তো জড়িয়ে পড়েনি, বাট the last 5 years we find certain changes. কনফ্লিক্ট এরিয়া এমন জায়গায় যাচ্ছে যেগুলো আগে কিন্তু ছিল। ফর এক্সাম্পল ইস্টার্ন ইউরোপ। Yes, in Eastern Europe, civil war was there in its most brutal form in Yugoslavia. যুগোস্লাভিয়াতে যা ঘটেছে সেটা নিয়েও বোধ 10খানা সেমিনার করে, কি ভয়াবহভাবে ওখানে রাষ্ট্রটা ভেঙেছে, সেখানে গৃহযুদ্ধ ঘটেছে। তারপরে আমরা হয়তো ভেবেছিলাম যে 5 new states have emerged. Now there may be a possibility of peace, but what is happening now? যুদ্ধ চলছে between Russia and Ukraine, and this Russia-Ukraine war is going on for a long time. আমরা জানি যুদ্ধ 10 দিন 15 দিনে থেমে যায়, এটা বছরের পর বছর থামার কোনো লক্ষ্য নেই। It's going on. সেক্ষেত্রে আমাদের প্রিপেয়ারনেস কি সেটা ভাবতে হবে। And very recently, the Gulf War, which has aggravated different types of crises in world politics. Very recently, our Prime Minister has informed the members of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha that we are really in deep trouble. We must be prepared for any eventuality. অনেক কিছু ঘটতে পারে, আমাদের প্রস্তুত থাকতে হবে। এনার্জি ক্রাইসিস, এরকম অনেক কিছু ঘটতে পারে। ইয়েস, আপাতত 1 মাসের জন্য বিরতি, বাট উই ডোন্ট নো হোয়াট উইল হ্যাপেন আফটার 1 month, because Donald Trump is the leader of the United States of America. Totally unpredictable. He doesn't accept any theory, any system. He is here to destroy all the present systems. যা যা সিস্টেম তৈরি হয়েছিল ভেঙে দিতে রাজি হয়ে, মানে প্রস্তুত হয়ে গেছে। Naturally, preparedness of a nation state is necessary, and I want to focus on that for preparedness. Now, ছোটভাবে প্রবোধ বলি দিয়েছে আগ্রহের মধ্যে শেষ করতে। What are India's challenges? What are the challenges that India may face in such a situation? এরকম একটা গ্লোবাল ক্রাইসিসে ভারতের সিচুয়েশনটা কি? Let us discuss India's challenges. Number 1, instability in neighborhood. As you all know, we live in an area where instability is the rule, not the exception. আমরা এমন একটা এলাকায় বাস করি যেখানে ইনস্টেবিলিটিটা নিয়ম, এক্সেপশন নয়। When we were thinking a long-term relationship with Bangladesh, entire system collapsed. যখন ভাবছিলাম যে শেখ হাসিনার সঙ্গে আমাদের একটা আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং হয়েছে, শেখ হাসিনা was protecting India's interest. India was very much happy with Sheikh Hasina. You all know what happened. Fortunately for us, another political party has captured power in Bangladesh. Jodi NCP বা this type of political party would capture power, God save us. আমরা আরেকটা বিপদে পড়তাম এই ইস্টার্ন জোনকে কেন্দ্র করে। Because you know, Narendra Modi's policy of Act East, the Act East policy depends on our intimate relationship with Bangladesh to a large extent. Narasimha Rao এর আমল থেকে আমরা Look East policy follow করেছিলাম। Present Prime Minister has changed it as Act East policy. কি ঘটতো আমি জানি না, ঘটেনি। Fortunately for us, যে দলগুলো শেখ হাসিনাকে তাড়িয়ে দিয়েছিল তারা যদি ক্ষমতায় এসে যেত তারপর কি ঘটতো? তাহলে ইন্ডিয়ার পক্ষে একদম এন্টায়ার পলিসিটা আবার নতুন করে ফ্রেম করতে হবে রিগার্ডিং বাংলাদেশ। আপাতত করতে হবে না, বিকজ BNP is also a political party. BNP also inherits Bangladesh Liberation War. তারা বাংলাদেশ লিবারেশন ওয়ারকে ইনহেরিট করে। মাঝখানে তাদের কিছু পলিসি ইন্ডিয়ার ক্ষোভের কারণ হয়েছিল, বাট প্রেজেন্ট প্রাইম মিনিস্টার তারেক তিনি বুঝতে পেরে গেছেন যে ভারতের সঙ্গে যদি কোনো একটা ভালো সম্পর্ক না থাকে তাকে খুব ক্রিটিক্যাল টাইমে একটু দিয়ে যেতে হবে। ন্যাচারালি আমরা আপাতত এই যে বলে না হাফ ছেড়ে বাঁচা, বাংলাদেশ সিচুয়েশনে হাফ ছেড়ে বেঁচেছে, কিন্তু ক্রাইসিসটা রয়ে গেছে, ক্রাইসিস ইজ স্টিল দেয়ার। আর ওয়েস্টার্ন ফ্রন্ট কি সেটা নিয়ে খুব বেশি ব্যাখ্যা করার দরকার নেই, একটা ট্রাবলসাম এরিয়া। পোস্ট অপারেশন সিন্দুর টেনশন ইজ স্টিল দেয়ার, অপারেশন সিন্দুর তার পরবর্তী টেনশন সেটাও রয়েছে। আমরা কিছুটা ওয়ার্কিং রিলেশনশিপ তৈরি করেছি উইথ মালদ্বীপস, উইথ শ্রীলঙ্কা, and China is interfering in this area. হাম্বানটোটাকে কেন্দ্র করে একটা টেনশন রয়েছে বিটুইন ইন্ডিয়া এন্ড চায়না, কারণ চায়না ওখানে একটা বেস বানাতে চাইছে। আমরা জানি বার্মাতে কি ঘটছে, মায়ানমার। সো নেপারহুড একটা ট্রাবলসাম এরিয়া ফর ইন্ডিয়া। And in 2014, when Narendra Modi came to power, he adopted an important policy of neighborhood first policy. Neighborhood first policy. And you remember, when Modi government took oath, all the heads of the state of our neighboring countries, they were invited to remain present in that ceremony. সেই সেরিমনিতে উপস্থিত থাকার জন্য সবাইকে ডাকা হয়েছে। পাকিস্তানের প্রধানমন্ত্রীকে ডাকা হবে কিনা সে নিয়ে একটু বিতর্ক ছিল, বাট আলটিমেটলি হি ওয়াজ ইনভাইটেড। কিন্তু 2019 সালে যখন সেকেন্ড গভর্নমেন্ট, সেকেন্ড NDA টুক ওথ, নেভারহুডকে ডাকা হয়, সবাইকে ডাকা হয়, কয়েকজনকে ডাকা হয়েছিল, অনলি দ্য মেম্বার্স অফ বিমস্টেক ওয়ার ইনভাইটেড। অর্থাৎ এই যে ডিপারচার পলিসি কিছুটা চেঞ্জ করতে হলো, তার কারণ হচ্ছে as you all know, Modi's neighborhood first policy is different from Morarji Desai or I.K. Gujral's policy of neighborhood first. খুব ছোটবেলায় আমরা যখন খুব ছোট মোরারজি দেশাইয়ের পলিসি ছিল neighborhood first policy, but Modi's policy is totally different. Modi policy টা কি? Yes, we want good relations with our neighbors, but without surrendering our vital national interest. আমাদের vital national interest কে সারেন্ডার করব না। মোরারজি দেশাইয়ের একটা নীতি ছিল, ঠিক আছে যদি পার্শ্ববর্তী দেশগুলো একটু বদমাইশি করে, we will accept it, আমরা একটু সহ্য করে যাব, we will tolerate it. But the policy of present government is that we will not tolerate any such activity. ফলে পাকিস্তান যদি কখনো অ্যাটাক করে, আমরা সমস্যা তৈরি করে, we will attack Pakistan. The latest example is Operation Sindoor. ফলে এই যে neighborhood, instability in neighborhood, that is one important challenge. Modi's neighborhood first policy কে অনেক সময় যোগ করা হয়েছিল when Narendra Modi visited Pakistan to attend the wedding ceremony of Nawaz Sharif's daughter. তিনি চলে গিয়েছিলেন নওয়াজ শরীফের মেয়ের বিয়ে অনুষ্ঠানে, উপস্থিত হয়ে আশীর্বাদ করে এসেছিলেন। সেখানে প্রচুর আলোচনা হয়েছিল, আমাদের মাঝে মাঝে এইসব বিষয় নিয়ে টেলিভিশন চ্যানেলে যেতে হয়, অনেক শুনতে হয়েছিল, এই তো সারেন্ডার করা হলো আমাদের ইন্টারেস্ট ইত্যাদি। But to me it was a message to the neighboring countries that yes, we want intimate relationship with you and I will take the initiative. Can you recall Atal Bihari Vajpayee's Lahore bus jatra, quote unquote, Lahore bus jatra? Atal Bihari Vajpayee went to Lahore, কোনো এতে বাসে করে গিয়েছিলেন, সেই সময় প্রচুর সে নিয়ে চর্চা হয়েছিল। But what happened afterwards? Another limited war between India and Pakistan at Kargil. কার্গিলে আরেকটা যুদ্ধ হয়েছে। ন্যাচারালি এখনকার নেভারহুড ফার্স্ট পলিসি সেটা ছিল বটে, কিন্তু নেভারহুড ফার্স্ট পলিসির মধ্যে আমাদের যেটা বক্তব্য, আমাদের ন্যাশনাল ইন্টারেস্টকে আমরা সারেন্ডার করব না। So there is a basic difference between Morarji Desai and I.K. Gujral's neighborhood first policy and Narendra Modi's neighborhood first policy. The re-emergent neighborhood first policy has shifted focus from long-standing preoccupation with Pakistan to the Bay of Bengal maritime geography. Another important shift in our focus. Orthat, Bay of Bengal maritime geography has become important to us. ওই পাকিস্তানকে আমরা পড়ে থাকি না। এর আগে দেখতেন যখন ভারত ইউএনএ তো যেত, both 50% of the lecture was full of criticizing Pakistan. Now we spend only 2 to 3 lines about Pakistan because we have other things to do. And one is the Bay of Bengal maritime geography. Our new neighborhood first policy emphasizes connectivity with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Myanmar. The main aim of this policy is to counter regional instability. So neighborhood is still important to us, but there is a tremendous shift in this policy. And Pakistan-centric approach has changed to a large extent. Now, to meet the turbulence in world politics, we have framed certain important policies like multi-alignment and strategic autonomy. That is another important policy followed by the Narendra Modi government. What is it? Now, over the past three decades, Indian foreign policy has been increasingly organized around a strategy of diversification. What is that? Deepening cooperation with the United States and the West, while also cultivating relationships across a wide range of regions and non-US aligned institutions. আমেরিকার সাথে সম্পর্ক আমরা ভালো বলছি অনেক দিন ধরে, আজকে নয়। Right from 1997-98, America has become our friend. Even when in 1998, India decided to have nuclear explosion for second time. Initially, America became furious. কিন্তু তারপরে ধীরে ধীরে পরিস্থিতিটা নরমাল হয়েছে। Initially, economic sanctions were there, but ultimately, all the sanctions were withdrawn. And now, international society has accepted India's position as a nuclear power. মোটামুটি এটা accepted. এখন আমাদের পলিসি দীর্ঘদিন ছিল আমেরিকার সঙ্গে, তার সঙ্গে আদার নন ইউএস অ্যালায়েন্স স্টেটস, তার সঙ্গেও আমরা সম্পর্ক ভালো রাখছি, লাইক রাশিয়া। দীর্ঘদিন ধরে আপনারা জানেন যে রাশিয়া থেকে তেল কেনা নিয়ে কি চলছে, বাট ইন্ডিয়া রিফিউজ টু এ লার্জ এক্সটেন্ট টু অ্যাকসেপ্ট আমেরিকান থ্রেট, যে রাশিয়া থেকে তেল কিনলে সব বন্ধ করে দেবো। একেবারে যে অ্যাকসেপ্ট করেনি বললে ভুল বলা হবে। ইন্টারন্যাশনাল পলিটিক্সে আমাদের রয়েছে থাকতে হবে। আমেরিকা যদি সমস্ত ইকোনমিক স্যাংশন করে, আমাদের স্যাংশন আমাদের ইকোনমি একেবারে ডিস্ট্রয় হয়ে যাবে। ফলে প্র্যাকটিক্যালি আমাদের কিছু না কিছু অ্যাডজাস্টমেন্টে যেতেই হবে। এটা অস্বীকার করতে নেই, এই প্রশ্নগুলোকে বলতে বাধার কিছু নেই। বাট স্টিল রাশিয়ার সঙ্গে তেল কেনার ব্যাপারটা আমরা চালিয়ে যাচ্ছি। এটা আমাদের স্ট্র্যাটেজি, যে শুধুমাত্র আমেরিকার সঙ্গে সম্পর্ক ভালো মানে উই উইল অ্যাকসেপ্ট অল দ্য ডিক্টেটস অফ আমেরিকা, নো, নট অ্যাট অল। ফলে আমাদের একটা পলিসি দীর্ঘদিন ধরে চলছিল। Now this approach is often described as multi-alignment. This approach is called multi-alignment. We can establish relations with all the international or regional organizations. As you all know, very recently we have a free trade agreement with European Union. আমরা তার সঙ্গে ফ্রি ট্রেড এগ্রিমেন্ট করেছি, এটা আমাদের পক্ষে খুব ভালো হবে। আবার আমেরিকার সঙ্গে বাণিজ্য চুক্তি হয়েছে। আমেরিকার সঙ্গে সম্পর্কটা কি সেটা একদম শেষে আমি আলোচনা করব, কারণ খুব সমস্যা হচ্ছে এই জায়গাটা আমাদের। কিন্তু আমরা এখন we have adopted the policy of multi-alignment. কারণ আমরা এখন অ্যাকসেপ্ট ধরে নিয়েছি ইটস an accepted fact that turbulence will be there in international relations and we must be prepared for that. When we followed non-aligned movement, our proposition was that the non-alignment আমাদের সবকিছুর কোথাও একটা প্যানাসিয়া হিসেবে ধরে নিয়েছিলাম। সমস্ত সব প্যানাসিয়া বাংলা মানে হচ্ছে সব বড় বড় বটিকা। আমরা নন অ্যালাইন সুতরাং আমরা সব এখান থেকে বেঁচে যাব। বুঝতে পেরেছি? আর নন অ্যালাইনমেন্ট থাকা সত্ত্বেও একাধিকবার যুদ্ধ হয়েছে না। উই আর 1962 ওয়ার and China is still occupying 40,000 more than 40,000 square kilometer outside China. আমরা বাঁচাতে পেরেছি পারিনি। ন্যাচারালি সেই পলিসি থেকে নতুন যে পলিসি আর এখন নন অ্যালাইনমেন্টের অবস্থা কি আমি জানি না, আপনাদের কতদিন মনে আছে, আমার নিজেরই মনে নেই যে লাস্ট কনফারেন্সটা কবে হয়েছিল নন অ্যালাইনমেন্ট। আমাকে দেখে আমাকে ডেট দিতে হবে, কারণ ওটা অলমোস্ট একটা ডেড অর্গানাইজেশন, একটা ডেড মুভমেন্ট। যাই হোক, তো এখন নিউ পলিসি ইজ মাল্টি অ্যালাইনমেন্ট। This strategy of multi alignment gives India the opportunity of a balanced stance in global conflicts such as Russia-Ukraine war and also the present Gulf War. এটা আমাদের কাছে একটা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ বিষয়। India refused to take sides while emphasizing dialogue. We always emphasize dialogue. In case of Russia-Ukraine war, our Prime Minister's speech was that it's not the time of war. This line became very, very popular internationally at least. Prime Minister এর বক্তব্য ছিল এটা যুদ্ধের সময় নয়, সবাই সেই লাইনটা বেশ কিছুদিন ধরে ব্যবহার করত। So this neutrality provides diplomatic leverage, enabling India to manage the relationship with both US and Russia. Actually, India is a member of Quad, though some problems in Quad are surfacing, and due to Donald Trump's peculiar behavior, India is also a member of BRICS. These are the major examples. Now, I want to give example on some important issues like India's preparedness in defense and security. Now, heavy investment in modernizing armed forces is going on in our country. India has bolstered indigenous production under Autonomy initiative. The Modi government wants to ensure preparedness for future conflicts. একটা জিনিস আমরা বুঝে গেছি, বিপদে পড়লে no one will save us. We have to save ourselves. And for a long time, অন্তত মানে প্রতিরক্ষার ক্ষেত্রে we were heavily dependent on other things, other states. অন্য রাষ্ট্রের উপর ভীষণ নির্ভরশীল ছিলাম। আত্মনির্ভর ভারত প্রজেক্ট এক্ষেত্রে একটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মাইলস্টোন in India's defense preparedness. এটা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মাইলস্টোন হয়েছে। In the 2025-2026 budget, the government has allocated rupees 6.81 lakh crore for defense sector, and there is a significant emphasis on capital outlay for domestic procurement. Atmanirbhar Bharat and domestic procurement mind these goals. Bharat এখন আত্মনির্ভর হতে চাইছে যতটা সম্ভব as far as practically. আমরা রাতারাতি রাফাল তৈরি করতে পারবো না, কিন্তু গুলিগুলো বানাতে পারি। We are trying to do that. Then there is large scale emphasis on indigenous manufacturing. Record defense production reached over 1.26 lakh crores. In 2026-27 budget, the government allocated a record 7.85 lakh crore to defense. And there is the focus on modernization and operational readiness. We have procured Rafale jets and we are enhancing our naval power also. The same idea, we have to save ourselves. নিজেদের নিজে বাঁচাতে হবে, আর্মিটাকে নিজেকে শক্ত করে রাখতে হবে। অন্তত ইরান দেখিয়ে দিয়েছে ultimately what will happen to Iran, I don't know. But till now, Iran is fighting. I don't support Iranian political system. If Iran will লড়াইটাকে স্বীকৃতি দিতেই হবে, it's fighting. Now India's focus is now on strengthening border infrastructure also, particularly LAC with China. We are strengthening our border infrastructure. মানে কিছু ডিফেন্সে পিকুলিয়ারিটি কিরকম ছিল আমি সেগুলো একটু বলছি ভালো করে। এক সময় মনে করা হতো বর্ডার ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার ডেভেলপ করবে না, ব্রিগেডিয়ার দাস বলবেন একটু পরে, এগুলো ওনার এরিয়া, যে বর্ডার ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার বাড়াবে না কেন, না শত্রু ঢুকে আসবে, ওই ডিফিকাল্ট টেরাইন থাকুক, শত্রু ঢুকতে পারবে না। হোয়াট হ্যাপেন্ড ইন 1962, চায়না এন্টার আসে, চায়না আসাম থেকে ঢুকেছে, পেস্ট পর্যন্ত চলে এসেছে। The present government has developed border infrastructure in LAC, line of actual control with China. Development of advanced drone and surveillance technology, that is also going on. There is technological modernization. The Indian military is undergoing a digital transformation. The ultimate objective is to prepare for multi-dimensional warfare, which includes cyber, space, and spatial operations. We are getting ready for that. Now come to the last part of my discussion. The government is also focusing on institutionalizing crisis response mechanism. How? India has created Rudra Brigade. What is Rudra Brigade? It is an integrated combat formation for independent offensive to manage multi-front threats. This Rudra Brigade is going to be a game changer. Then energy security and supply chains amid global uncertainties like present West Asian conflict and economic volatility. The Modi government focuses on building a resilient India through diversified energy partnership like procuring Russian crude oil. We have 7 to 8 weeks of strategic petroleum reserves. So, if escalating conflict can create supply chain disruption, it will save us from disaster. So these are our preparedness. These are preparedness on the part of our country. But there are certain challenges are still there. আমি প্রথম চ্যালেঞ্জ বলেছিলাম আমাদের নেবারহুড চ্যালেঞ্জ। Another challenge is Trump to reality. Now, Trump's return to White House has once again altered the contours of international politics. As you all know, the second Trump administration has adopted a more assertive and unpredictable approach to US foreign policy, totally unpredictable. No one can say what will happen tomorrow. Now it deploys tariffs and other economic tools against both rivals and partners. No one is fair. বন্ধু ও শত্রু আমি তোমার উপর ট্যারিফ চাপাচ্ছি, এই হচ্ছে ট্রাম্পের পলিসি। বলে সামলালে সামলাও, নইলে আমি ট্যারিফ চাপিয়ে দিলাম। অনেকে বলছে আমেরিকার কাছে ভারত কেন মাথা নত করছে, আমেরিকার অর্থনীতি ভারতের চেয়ে কত গুণ জানেন? আমি সেই একটা বসে বলবো। আর আমেরিকা যদি আমাদের উপর ইকোনমিক স্যাংশন চাপায়, কে আছে? রাশিয়া আছে, সোভিয়েত ইউনিয়ন, নাকি বাইপোলার পলিটিক্স আছে? কোনো না কোনো ভাবে অ্যাডজাস্টমেন্টে যেতেই হয় ইন্টারন্যাশনাল পলিটিক্সে, কিন্তু প্রটেক্টিং আওয়ার ওন ন্যাশনাল ইন্টারেস্ট। Trump is expressing open hostility towards global institutions and pursuing a highly transactional, personalized style of diplomacy. তার ডিপ্লোমেসি তিনি ডিপ্লোমেসিও মানেন না, যার ডিপ্লোমেসি একদিন রাষ্ট্রনায়করা বলেছে উনিও সব মানেন টানেন না। দেখেছিলেন তো ইউক্রেনের প্রেসিডেন্টকে প্রায় ধাক্কা মেরে অফিস থেকে বার করে দিয়েছে। একদম প্রেসিডেন্ট বলে আসে, তার গায়ে হাত দিয়ে শুনুন শুনুন আপনি শুনুন, অনেক টাকা দিয়েছি, টাকাগুলো ফেরত দিন। সবাই দেখেছে এগুলো, সেগুলো রেকর্ড করা হয়েছে, সেগুলো দুনিয়ায় সবাই দেখে ফেলেছে। তো উই হ্যাভ টু ডিল উইথ দিস পারসন, এর সঙ্গে তো ডিল করতে হচ্ছে। সো লাস্ট লাইন, these developments have unfolded Amid intensified geopolitical competition and the weakening of the post-Cold War international order, contributing to a more fluid and uncertain global landscape. The global landscape is fluid and uncertain, but India is prepared for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Doctor, for his illuminating and enlightened speech for what India has progressed to protect India's population, India's people, but at the same time, it is my request, as I have told here, we can discuss more and more, we can say more and more. Academic discussions will be here. Our Brigadier Das is here, he will say on practical thing, but it is my request to give his note, to give his writings that can be sent to the policymakers for our future reference. Now I request Amrita.
It is now my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Anindajyoti Mojumdar, Professor in the Department of International Relations at Jadavpur University. He will deliver an invited lecture on the topic Shifts in Global Geopolitics and the Recurrent Inevitability of Conflicts. Dr. Mojumdar is a distinguished scholar in strategic studies and international relations, former Dean of the Faculty of Arts and current Director of the School of International Relations and Strategic Studies at Jadavpur University. A Fulbright Medical Fellow, he has published widely, including areas foreign policy, past patterns and present trends 2025, and reimagining South Asia 2026. We are honored to have him with us, and now I invite Dr. Anindajyoti Mojumdar to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. And I congratulate Kidderpore College for organizing this very interesting titled seminar. And also thank Kidderpore College for having me in this program. Now I will be very brief. In fact, we are behind schedule by I think 18, 19 minutes. And I'll try to be brief because already you have heard Professor Chatterjee and Dr. Makhluk, who have talked about a number of challenging issues and the theoretical perspectives that provides kind of expansion of existing world order. In fact, in my presentation, there will be 5 points to be considered. First, I would like to discuss why there is a pretty little chance of World War III. In the second section, I would like to elaborate on the point when there still could be a possibility of World War III. And in the third section, I might kind of focus on the geopolitical shifts and the inevitability of conflicts. And fourth session will be on India's strategic culture, as I understand. And the final section will be on India's global strategy, obviously from academic perspective and not from the perspective of the military professional. The points that I would like you to consider first, that is, there is no perfect state, there is no perfect ideology, there is no perfect system or order. So, obviously, we are not really within any kind of perfect system, and there is always this possibility of imperfection, turning into crisis. And as Professor Chatterjee was referring to, crisis of liberalism, crisis of democracy, crisis of world order, and there is a new word that is in fashion these days, that is called perma crisis. That we are in crisis most of the time, permanently under crisis, and therefore, it provides a new kind of attitude, a new kind of approach to the understanding of our existence, our living, our international relations. So we will talk about certain practical considerations, with a theories, because different theories will have predicted different kinds of observations with regard to why there is very little chance of World War III. First thing is, war has evolved over time. So total wars or absolute wars are no longer preferable by the states because of the consequences that a total war might have. That either you win or you lose, and if you lose, it would be well nigh difficult to recover. Nobody wants to get back into that kind of situation anymore. Rather, limited wars are preferable, and limited wars in terms of limited targets, limited engagements, confining the wars to a particular zone. These are manageable wars, and these may provide some kind of benefit to the party that starts a war. So, first thing is, total war is out of fashion. Second, we talk about international law, international organizations, taboos and norms, and these are not tremendously effective, but still they exercise some control over most of the states who do not consider themselves to be parties to power struggle. That is, they don't want to get involved in power struggle, and there are plenty of such states in the world, and for them, international law, for them, international organizations, so they have, crucial kind of presence in their relations with other states. Thirdly, there is deterrence, nuclear deterrence. That, when we talk about Pax Atomica, that will live under peace of atom, that is because there are nuclear weapons, states are very apprehensive about the consequences of a nuclear war, and therefore they would not normally would try to create such a situation where there would be possibility of nuclear war. So nuclear war themselves have some kind of restraining effect on state behavior. There is stability paradox that nuclear weapons actually do not rule out any kind of, all kinds of warfare, but nevertheless, once again, there could be small wars, but not really a kind of all-out warfare. And there is another point, that is unit cost of warfare has escalated exponentially. The kind of expenditure that is made in terms of warfare and what we get in return. What Trump has got in return, what Putin has got in return in Ukraine. Yes, Putin has captured some portion of Ukraine, that is strategically, that is beneficial to Russia, but let's say the kind of expenditure Putin has made in terms of financial resources, in terms of human resources, and the war is still continuing. So this unit cost of war, that is the calculation that we generally make, what would be beneficial for us. This has escalated in such a way that war sometimes is viewed as essentially a waste of money. And when we talk about the world wars, remember the parties to the World War I and World War II, except Imperial Japan and United States, were mostly European states. And these European states had colonies in different parts of the world, or for that matter, if you think of United Kingdom, the British Commonwealth, and naturally had, those Australia, New Zealand, and other such, members of Commonwealth of Nations, all got involved in these warfares of the colonial masters, and therefore these became world wars. Today's situation is entirely different, in the sense that there are no colonies to be sucked into the conflicts of their colonial masters. Secondly, almost all of these countries are now democratic states. Though democracy is in crisis, they are not perfect democracies, and they are all flawed democracies, including United States, India. These are all, regarded as flawed democracy. But nevertheless, these are democracies. There are not many great powers, in true sense of the term, that might use imperialism or hegemonic policies to fulfill their objectives. In fact, most states, they now show the tendency of not getting involved in other people's war. Trump wanted, requested these European countries, and Trump instigated those European countries, saying many things. Nobody actually seemed interested in getting involved in this present Gulf War. So there is very little chance of World War III. That would be the conclusion from this kind of discussion. But none of these above statements that I have made provide a guaranteed fail-safe system. If you talk about deterrence, if you talk about international organization, if you talk about cost of war, if you talk about, no preference for total war, but nevertheless, they cannot guarantee that there would always be peace. Miscalculations can lead to inadvertent warfare. Now, one can bring down too many states. If you consider Germany had a realist, kind of prescriptions, and these big powers would always create problems in international politics. And America is viewed as the source of instability in the contemporary system, but the idea is, can you sideline America? This kind of debate, whether we can shift the headquarters of the United Nations to some other south, global south country, whether we can fund various programs of the United Nations, because USA has already withdrawn from a lot many, kind of international agencies. I think 66 international agencies. US is not paying any money to World Health Organization. US has withdrawn support from all kinds of climate financing, world peacekeeping missions. So, well, the third world countries or the global south countries should now come forward and think about a new kind of international organization that can be established and can be funded by the third world countries. Now, if you think about the geopolitical shifts, you must be aware of these slow and constant movements of tectonic plates that glide over the upper mantle of the earth. And when there is a collision, when there are slips, there are earthquakes, and we feel the tremors. Now, international geopolitics in a way is similar to that. That states would always try to adjust with one another. They would, kind of have smaller kind of cooperation, sometimes conflict, competition, and there will be constant tussle among states. And whenever there is this slip, you cannot predict that. Whenever there is this slip, there is this collision, you might find, geopolitical earthquakes. And essentially, if we can extend this kind of analogy, is, earthquake below magnitude 4 is considered to be safe. Find some of the conflicts below magnitude 4. From 5, it starts causing damage. So you can make certain gradations of these conflicts as well. For example, you might find that at 4.5, the conflict between Cambodia and Thailand with 100 deaths. Then at 7 or 7.5, Israel's attack on Gaza and with around 75,000 deaths. Or you might have magnitude 10 plus, huge magnitude, where you have this kind of World War II, where there were deaths of 70 to 80 million. So we cannot predict that. Likewise, we cannot predict when exactly will there be a war. There will be fault lines. There are many situations of potential wars, but we can predict that there will be a war. And these shifts that take place all the time, in fact, throughout the history of international relations. Let me just say now there is this shift from Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific. That everybody knows these days, that this will be Asian century, this is no longer Eurocentric, the world is becoming Asia-centric. And there is this famous saying that is attributed to the Belgian PM, Paul Henry Spaak. He actually said that in Europe today there are two types of states: small states and states that are yet to realize that they are small. So essentially, Europe is no longer important, and important obviously is Asia and China, India, and non-Western certain global south states that have emerged as important economic, political, and military actors. So naturally, the way we understood world politics from the Western perspective, this is also shifting because the values of these Asian states, though there will be a debate about Asian values, and there will be, the approaches, the attitudes of these Asian states are somewhat different from the Western countries. So the Western prescriptions might not work here when we talk about this Asian century. And here, obviously, another important aspect is that any kind of hegemonic attempts, coercive measures, economic or military, are being resisted, diplomatically or militarily, but no attempt of hegemony is, is kind of accepted by the other powers. Because, just referring to Foucault a little bit, that in every power relationship, there is a party over which power is exercised. And there will be a resistance from that particular party. And this resistance is very clear now in the contemporary period. If we talk about realism and Morganto, then obviously the idea was that power will be exercised over other parties, but the response, this retaliation, it is becoming more prominent, becoming more clearly visible in contemporary period, because small states are also in a way improving their status. I will just very briefly refer to two aspects. That is, one is India's strategic culture, as I understand. And, the strategic culture, it's a kind of area that is very debatable, and it is open to interpretations. But I will just very briefly summarize what I understand as India's strategic culture. That here we have the trajectories of peace and conflict intertwined. If you look into our past heritage, that is Ramayana, Mahabharata, Manusmriti, everything, everywhere you will find that realist ideas are somewhat matched by idealist positions. And there is always a focus on the middle path. That means ahimsa or non-violence is desirable, but to repulse the evil, you need to use force. That is the basic idea, and therefore real politics is enmeshed in moral politics. So the strategic culture that we have is essentially non-provocative, non-predatory, non-hegemonic, but use of force is viewed as necessary under certain circumstances, essentially to repulse the evil. So India has to maintain optimum war preparedness, but it would have a defensive orientation. Like that we would have nuclear weapons, all right, but we also have a kind of doctrine called no first use. That there would not be a kind of projection of hegemonic or predatory kind of policies, but there would be, of course, a kind of